Hello, welcome to this session on the DCI dashboards for affirmative action plan data. In this video, we will walk through each of the sections of the DCI dashboards application, including their contents and navigation throughout the application. So let's begin with the main page. On the main page, this is where you'll land when you first log in to the DCI dashboards application. And the main page provides an overview of some of the highlights from each of the individual detailed sections within the dashboards application, and we'll cover each of those subsequently to go through them in detail as well. From the main page, the first thing we can do in terms of navigation and what we view within the application is at the very top. The first drop down is for the selection of the AAP report year. So you'll select the year for which you want to view your AAP data. Let's select 2021 here. And then the second selection is the location. Location is sort of an all-encompassing term used throughout the DCI dashboards for your affirmative action plan establishment level. So if you're doing AAPs by establishment, the locations will be some sort of establishment. If you do functional AAPs, this would be a functional AAP. It could be a different other grouping within your organization, depending on how you've set up and done the data and the analyses with DCI. But we'll kind of refer to them as locations throughout the application and in this video. But the location drop-down list will give us each of the locations that are available to view. So we can view information for individual locations throughout all of these pages. We can also view the information for the entire organization, which is just the aggregate of all of those individual locations, and do that by selecting the all location in this list. And we also have functionality to create what are called access groups. So if you're an admin user, you can define and then assign access to your users, different access groups, with an access group being a collection of individual locations. So as an example, if we put together an access group called Arizona sites, and it was an aggregation of all of these individual locations that we have within the state of Arizona, then if we selected that access group and viewed the AAP data for that access group, it would show us all of the information from all of those Arizona locations combined into a single set of pages. So in this case, for this video, let's choose the all location. We'll look at all of the information across the entire organization for the AAP report year of 2021. So when we click apply here, the screen will refresh with whatever selection that we put together and show the data for that selection. So on the main page, as I said, it's an overview of the different sections within the application as a whole. So you get a preview of the details for each of those sections. The first section at the top is the overview, which is going to give us, depending again on what selections we made at the top, it's going to give us the counts of the number of locations, again, establishments, AAPs, within that selection that we made. So for our all locations, we have 35 individual locations included in these results. Gives us the job group count, which is the total number of staffed job groups across all of those locations, and gives us the total number of employees covered across all of those locations. The numbers and the arrows that'll show up in red and green in this section will show comparison to the previous year. So if there was an increase or decrease and what percentage increase or decrease those were from the prior year report year, once you have more than 1 year loaded into the DCI dashboards application. So the overview just gives us that general information. The next section is the diversity and inclusion section. This section gives us some snapshot counts from that employee count that we have within the level that we've selected for number of female employees and percentage of the workforce that are female employees, number and percentage of minority employees, and also the number and percentage of employees who are individuals with a disability. The national average numbers that show up below each of those are linked to some national data sources. So for the female and minority information, those are linked to published EEO1 data published by EEOC. And the individuals with disability statistics are linked to a report from the Department of Labor, Bureau of Labor Statistics on employment numbers within the U.S. workforce for individuals with a disability. If you click on one of those links, it'll actually pop up the the corresponding data source goes straight to their website. So for reference, you can see that as to where those percentages come from. Those numbers within the DCI dashboards are there mainly as just another external benchmark value to look at against your workforce. In terms of what you would typically think of as AAP analyses and implementing those results, there's really nothing that you would use to implement your program. It's just a different view of your workforce from what you typically would look at when you're looking at individual AAP reports. So as we've stated in the past, one of the goals in providing and creating this DCI Dashboards application was to give our clients a slightly different view of some of the data that go into their affirmative action plan results that they do on an annual basis. So this is an example of one of those where you may see numbers where you got what your workforce looks like, but these just give you some other viewpoints of some other national, broad, high-level data sources to compare to, just as a reference point, but not as something that you would take as an action item within your affirmative action program. The next section is for the goals summary. This provides an overview of total number of goals across, and these are placement goals, across all of the locations that have been selected for this data view, the number of job groups with goals, and the number of locations with goals out of the number of locations that you have AAPs for. The goal attainment section is the next section. This similarly shows results of the placement goal attainment measures of your prior year's AAP goals in terms of the number and percentage of those where the goal was attained, those where the goal was not attained, and those cases where you either had a limited number of opportunities, so not really a meaningful chance to evaluate whether the goal was attained or not attained, or no opportunities at all to fill positions, and so you couldn't make a measure as to whether the goal was attained or not attained. The next section as we scroll down is the EEO disparity analysis section, and this is where the analysis is done of personnel activity. So looking at applicant flow, promotion activity, and terminations activity to look for cases where you have different selection rates, promotion rates, termination rates between groups based on race or gender, and looking for cases where those differences in selection rates are different to the extent that they're statistically significant. So they couldn't have just occurred by chance. And so it's the initial pass to do some additional analysis and looking at those practices and what were involved with them. But they're broken down in this example into two sections where we have the results in number of flags, and flags is just cases where there was a statistically significant difference is considered a flag. And so that can be between any two groups. It can be between men and women in a particular job group or job title. It can be between two race groups. But a flag is a case where there's a statistically significant difference between two groups. So we get a summary of the results of the number of flags, and then those broken down by count and percentage for each of the personnel activities that are captured under the affirmative action plan data for the report year. And similarly, the same thing with the shortfall values, and the shortfalls are just the number of difference between who was selected and who was expected to be selected in those cases where there was a statistically significant difference. And those are also broken down by activity type as well. In this section, we can see the results by job group, by job title, and then we'll come back to the overtime, but actually the overtime option applies to all of these sections on the main page. And so we'll look at those trends in just a second. The next section down is the veteran summary. The veteran summary gives us information on the veteran hiring rate compared to the veteran hiring benchmark that's established for the AAP report year. And in cases where the hiring rate meets or exceeds the benchmark, which is linked here, you'll get a note that says that the benchmark was met. If it's not, then you'll see that it's not met. The other section that's listed here is an overall evaluation of outreach efforts and the effectiveness of them. We'll explore this a little more deeply when we get to the veteran summary section and the individuals with disabilities summary section as to how that's calculated. But basically, that's a very quick, simple evaluation of whether outreach efforts based on the data were effective in terms of targeting applicants and employees who were identified as veterans or who self-identified as those with disabilities. So the similar setup for the individuals with disabilities summary section at the bottom, we'll get a comparison of the overall utilization rate compared to the target rate for utilization for individuals with disability in your workforce, and then an overall readout of what the effectiveness of the outreach efforts were for that. Now, for each of these, and we'll drill down in those sections as well, the distinction between these different categories. But we can look at these rates based on all hires or all employees, as well as based on responses. And so we'll talk about what the differences of those are when we get to that section. But they're two different views if there are differences in terms of response rates for employees or for applicants as they're applying in terms of their self-identification rates. Now, let's come back to the idea of the overtime option, because as you see in each of these sections, there is a tab to view each of those sections over time. So if you've got more than 1 year loaded into the DCI dashboards, you'll be able to view for each of these sections some charts that show you results tracking over time. So in this case, we have 3 years that were loaded into this sample dashboard, and you can see over time for each of those measures we have in each of these overview sections, things like the number of locations, number of job groups, number of employees from across those 3 years, and then similar ideas for each of these sections. You can see the results for diversity and inclusion items in terms of representation. You can see the results for the number of goals across those years. You can also see that in goal attainment, capturing both the patterns across years and then the outcomes of the placement attainment measures. And similarly, in the EEO disparity analyses, you can see these broken down by both job group and job title, as well as by the flag counts and by the shortfall counts for each of those to pick up trends for those. And then the same idea with the veterans summary and the individuals with disabilities summary sections, where you can look at the trends over time for those. And for both of those, you'll see those marked against either the benchmark or the target values, which are shown as the red lines in those charts. So you can see where the hiring rate or utilization rate stood compared to those over time. In all of these charts, and this is true throughout the dashboard, so we'll see this as we go through each of the sections as well. These charts are designed to be interactive on screen so that when you mouse over different sections of the chart, it'll give you details about what that part of the chart is describing. So what data are represented by that part. So it'll show you things like the hiring rates by year as we move over the bars. If we go up to disparity analyses, it'll show us at the different data points the number of flags by activity type and things like that. So that's a general navigation tip throughout the application is, in addition to just looking at the charts, you can interact with those on screen by moving over different data points and different parts of the chart itself. So from the main section, now let's drill down into each of the individual sections that where we saw a sneak preview of them on the main page, but we can actually drill down into more of the details within each section. So the left-hand navigation bar, we will go through each of those detailed sections that we have in addition to the main page we were looking at. So I'll start with the diversity and inclusion section. When I click on the diversity and inclusion icon in the left-hand navigation pane, we'll see that we have two different pages or sections split out within that overall section. We have one page for gender and one for race ethnicity. The contents are essentially the same for each. It's just a matter of which area we're looking at. If we're looking at gender numbers and comparisons, or if we're looking at race ethnicity numbers and comparisons for the workforce. So I'll walk through the gender page as an example of what the contents look like. At the top, the first section, we have an overview and a demographic section. So you'll recognize these as the same information that was presented on the main page carried over to the detail page here. And then the first section where we have some charts here is the diversity section. We get a couple of basic charts, in this case showing us the gender distribution of the workforce for the current year, as well as the distribution over time. So a comparison of male and female employees within the overall workforce for this reporting year, and then what the comparison looks like across the different years that are included in the dashboards application. Now, one other general tip for all of these charts that we have throughout the application, in the title bar of the chart, you'll see some little icons that do a couple of different things, and we'll go through all of these as we go through different ones in different places. One of those, the first one on the far right hand side, looks like the little expand icon, which is exactly what it does. If we click on that, it will expand that particular chart to basically a full screen chart with the title bar in it, which still includes the same interactivity. But this can be helpful if you're trying to view some of the details of a chart, but you want to see it bigger than just one chart on a larger page. You can blow that up. And then to shrink it back down, you click on the icon again to return it back to the full page. The other icon that's on this one looks like a little download link, which is exactly what it is. So if you wanted to download any of these charts within the dashboards application and save those as an image file, you just click on that download link and it'll download those. So here at the bottom you can see that it downloaded this one as a JPEG file. So we could then take this chart that we were just looking at, and if you want to use it outside of the dashboard someplace else, it's just an image file you can work with. The next section in the diversity and inclusion section is the data view section. The data view, and you'll see this throughout some of the other sections as well, the data view is sort of your detailed table of the results for a particular section. And it includes several different pieces of information. So on the location tab, it's going to show us each of the locations under the level that we chose to report on. And if you wanted to drill down within one of those, you click on the icon on the left-hand side, and it will drill down for the locations. If we choose one of the locations, it'll drill down into the affirmative action plan job groups under that location and show you the counts and percentages within that location by job group. So in this case, this is looking at the results for the entire organization. We can see counts and percentages of male and female employees by job group across the entire data set. Now, some of the other things that we can do within the grid, in the title bar, we have an option for adding the year-on-year change. If we click that slider, it'll add to the data view as part of the inline view. It adds additional information that shows comparisons of the current reporting year that we're looking at to the previous year. And so those numbers will be added right into the rest of the data view. So you can see count and percentage changes for groups from the prior year displayed within the data view itself. The next icon over will let us, if we wanted to actually switch the data view from here to a different report year, we can do that from here as well. And then the little wrench icon for a data view lets us export the information that's in this data view we're seeing on screen, um, save it as an Excel worksheet. So the other view within the data view is looking at the information by job group. So whereas before we were drilling down into job groups within a location, here we're just looking at job groups across all locations. And if we wanted to expand the information for one of those lines in the data view, we can click on this icon to the right-hand side here, and it'll give us the information that's on that report line over time in a trend graph across the multiple years that we have within the application. So the next section is the map view section. In the map view, we'll see on a US map for all of the locations that we have where we have location-based AAPs, we'll see representation of each of those locations on the map with relative size shown based on the size of the dot. So basically, the larger the dot is, the more employees, in this case, we have at that particular location. So for our Miami location here, we've got 1,536 employees. You've got a pretty good size dot. You go to one of these smaller dots, like up in Nashville, we've only got 56 employees there. So if you're looking at a glance for kind of a comparative view of size of or by number of employees across the map, you can see that from here to kind of see where your employees tend to be clustered. In this example, for example, we have a good number of employees in the Southern California and Arizona area, and then in the eastern half of the country, we have a lot of smaller locations there. Now, if you click on the dot within the map, you'll get a view of the details for that particular location. And since we're looking here at the diversity and inclusion section, you'll see a comparison of representation of male and female employees within that location. Then the next section is the job pattern view. And this is, again, one of those cases where it's a slightly different view of the same data that you're probably familiar with in looking at your affirmative action plans on a yearly basis. But in this case, we've taken the same data, and rather than reporting it out by things like job groups or departments and even locations, we're looking at the information grouped by EEO1 occupational categories. And so as you look at the pyramid, you'll see that the EEO1 categories going from executive, senior level officials and managers at the top, down through each of the different categories, down to service workers at the bottom. And as you mouse over those sections, you'll see a quick snapshot of what the employee numbers look like at that level. If we wanted to click on one of those sections, so let's say we click on the professionals level, you'll see the makeup of the professionals category of the workforce, in this case across the entire organization for the 2021 report year. So the next section I'll go to is on the left-hand side is the goals summary section. This is going to show us our affirmative action plan goals. And you'll see the subsections for the goals summary are, we can look at the overall results, and then we can also look at results specifically for goals for women and goals for minorities. So I'm going to click on the overall section, and we'll view the contents here. In the goals summary page, you'll see at the top an overview of the placement goals from the current year's affirmative action plan analyses. So you'll see total number of goals, number of goals you had the prior year, and then the number of job groups across all those locations that had goals. And you'll also see the categorization of those goals for the current year. So out of all those goals that we have, how many of them were new goals, meaning we didn't have a goal for that group last year, but we do this year. We have the eliminated category, which means we had 35 cases where a job group had a goal for a particular target group for women or minorities, for example, in the previous year, but they don't have it this year. And then we have recurring goals, which means we had a goal for that job group and that target group last year, and we still have a same, maybe not the same percentage, but we still have a goal for that same job group and that same target group in this year's report year. And then the goals by subgroup chart to the right will show us, based on overall number of goals, what percentage of those are goals for women, what percentage of those were goals for minorities. Within this chart, there's also another icon. You see the little eyeball or CBS icon, whichever you see when you look at it. When you click on that, and we'll see this in other places in the application as well, it gives you different options for how to view the information within that chart. So in this case, the default we were looking at those by percentage, but if we choose to view by count, it'll change the chart and show us based on the number of goals rather than showing the percentage for each female and minority within the AAP results. So that eyeball icon lets you choose the view of the data within that particular chart. The next section is for the top goal areas, and this will show us the chart on the left by locations and the chart on the right by job groups. Shows us the locations or job groups that had the highest number of overall goals, or had the highest number of locations that had goals for that job group if you're looking at it by job group. One of the things that you can do, in addition to interacting with this chart, you can change the number of items shown in the chart. So by default, it's going to show the top 5 for each of these. But if you click in the show top form there, you can change that to show more or fewer within that chart. So depending on how many locations you have or how many job groups you want to view, you can increase or decrease the number of those shown in the chart. And if you expand that chart, if you wanted to show more of those and capture those as an image, you can expand the chart as well to get a bigger chart so you can see in more detail the listings for each of those. Then the next section is the data view. And again, similar to what we saw before, the data view is going to show us the details in a table for the content area. So in this case, we're looking at the number of goals by location or by job group, and they're broken down in this case by total number of goals, and then the number of those goals that were goals for women and those that were goals for minorities. The map view section for goals will show, again, the distribution on the US map by location of the number of goals that you have at a particular AAP location. And the size of the dot on the map will show the relative number of goals at a particular location. So you go to a small dot like this location in Houston, shows we don't have any placement goals at that one. But if you go to a bigger dot like this one in Terre Haute, Indiana, you'll see that one has 7 goals. Go to a bigger one like this one in Arizona and Holbrook, has a total number of 10. And just like in the previous map view, you click on a dot for a location, it'll show you the details of the goals within that particular location. Then the final chart on the page is the job pattern view. And again, this will show the numbers of goals presented by EEO1 occupational category. So a slightly different view of the same information that we looked at by location and we looked at it by job groups, but this shows us the collection by EEO1 occupational category. And if we click on a category, it'll show us the number of goals that were in job groups that fell within that particular EEO1 occupational category. So the next section in the navigational bar is the goal attainment section. When we click on that, you'll see that we have an overall section, as well as individual sections for goal attainment for women and goal attainment for minorities. So I'll click on the overall section there, and we'll walk through the sections for the goal attainment, looking at the overall results. The overview section will show the overall results of placement goal attainment. So this is for all possible goals for women and minorities across all the locations. It'll tell us the number and percentage of cases where the goal was attained, where it wasn't attained, where there was a too limited number of opportunities to make an effective measurement, and then in cases where there were no opportunities whatsoever to make any kind of measurement on goal progress. And then the current year attainment chart on the right-hand side will show that information broken out by type of attainment result. Then the next section for the number of top unattained goals cases, similar to what we saw with the number of goals. In this case, the goal attainment results will show by location the number of locations that had the top number of unattained goals, and we can increase or decrease that number that's shown by adjusting that value in real time within the show top item in the title bar. And it'll also break those down in the overall page that we're looking at between the goals for women and the goals for minorities within that location. When we look at the job group chart, we'll see the same thing, but this is across the locations in this level that we're reporting, and show those job groups that had the highest number of unattained goals across all of those locations, and breaks those down into female goals and minority goals within the chart as well. In the data view section, again, we've got the table showing the detailed counts and percentages by location, as well as by job group if we drill down within a location, and the results that we had in terms of the overall attainment, but also the details of number of placements and count and percentage of placements that went to the target group, so that we can see the kind of the bottom line results of the goal attainment measurement for that particular location and job group. Then the map view section, on the US map, based on the size of the dot, you'll see what the goal attainment success rate was for a particular location. So the larger the dot is, the higher percentage of goals were attained. And if you click on a dot, so if we click on the Miami location, you can see the more detailed results within that location of the outcomes of the goal attainment measurement for the AAP. Now within the map, the default view is to see those based on the number or the percentage of those that were attained, but you can also change that view to look at it by any of the other outcome values. So for those not attained, as well as those that had limited or no opportunities. So if we change that to the not attained view, you can see the larger the result, or the larger the dot on the map, you can see that the higher percentage of placement goals were not attained within those locations. So at a glance on the map, you can see where goals were being attained and not being attained by changing the view for that map view. Then the job pattern view at the bottom, again, groups the goal attainment results by EEO1 occupational category. And so if we click on one of those, we get the aggregated results within EEO1 occupational category of how the placement goal attainment results that were done by AAP job group, if they're aggregated to the EEO1 occupational code level, what those results would look like. The next section is the EEO disparity analysis section, and there are a lot of details to this section. The first level, we can see that we can review those results by job group as well as job title. And if you click on one of those, like the job group level, you'll see that there's an overall set of pages, as well as individual activity type pages. So we can look at a page where it shows results just for applicant analyses, those for promotions and terminations, and we can actually break down the terminations analyses into different termination types as well. So I'll click on the overall page to just show you the example of what they look like overall. And then if you wanted to streamline those results to an individual activity type, you would just choose that page rather than the overall page for the level, either the job group or job title that you're looking at. So the first section at the top, the overview section, shows the number of cases, again, the number of flags, number of cases where there was a statistically significant difference between two groups when they were compared, and also broken down by activity type that was being analyzed. And it'll give you the count and percentage of those out of all of those cases by activity type. So in this example, the more than half of the cases where we had a statistically significant difference were results from our applicant flow analysis out of all the different activity types that were being evaluated. Same idea with the shortfalls. So shortfalls being the number of people difference between what actually happened in terms of selections or terminations and what was expected. You get the breakdown of those by activity type and what percentage of the overall shortfalls were made up by that activity type. The next section of charts shows the breakdown of results by activity type, by race ethnicity groups, and by gender groups, and then the overall chart at the bottom here that kind of combines all of those. So it shows us all of the groups as well as all of the activity types collapsed into one horizontal stacked bar chart. So each of these, you can interact with those charts by moving through the chart itself. But one feature that, and this applies throughout all of these charts, but this is a good example of where it comes in a little bit easier to display. You can actually interact with the key if you wanted to show or hide different groups or different items within the chart. So if you wanted to drill this down, we can hide certain groups and look at just the results for whichever groups we decide to select. You can also do that when looking at things like the activity, looking at the flags by activity type and by race, ethnicity, and gender. If you wanted to hide different types of activity. So let's say I don't really want to look at the terminations here. Let's just look at applicants and promotions. You can hide those by clicking on them in the key, and it'll just show the remaining items within the chart itself. With each of these, by default, when we first come to this page, it's going to show the results by flags, but if we click on the view, the eyeball icon within each chart, we can change those to show them by shortfalls. And the other option with these charts, it's going to show those based on the activity type, but if we wanted to drill down into just showing gender results or just showing race ethnicity results, including over time, we can choose those options at the top, and then it'll display that information accordingly. Then the top flags and shortfalls option, similarly, we can show the locations or the job groups that had the highest number of either flags or the highest shortfall values, depending on which view that we select in the chart, and then also show whatever number of the top number of locations or top number of job groups by editing the show top value there. The data view section then will show us the details in a tabular form for each of the locations as well as the job groups across all the locations. And similarly, we can do things like show the year-on-year differences. If we want to look at counts and percentage differences compared to the prior year, we turn that option on, and we can view that in line with the rest of the information for the current reporting year. Then the map view, we can see relative size on the map of either the number of flags or the number of shortfalls, depending on which option we select under the eyeball icon, for each of the locations that we have AAP results for across the map. So again, the larger the dot is on the map, the higher the shortfall number or the higher number of flags relative to those that are smaller dots on the map. And when you click on an individual dot, it's going to give you the details for that location. And the job pattern view also takes the same information and aggregates it by EEO1 occupational category. So when we click on those to show the details, we'll get a breakdown of the results either by flags or by shortfalls for that particular occupational category, then broken down by the activity types in this case. So the next section we'll take a look at is the veteran summary. The veteran summary has two subsections, one showing results for all hires and the second one shows results for responses. The difference between those is just going to be based on who gets counted in determining things like the rates. So for all hires, we're looking at the number of people who self-identified as veterans out of all of those people that were hired, regardless of what their responses were to the self-ID question. The responses cut will show the information where it's only out of those who responded with something definitive, what percentage out of those who gave a response that you actually know whether they are a veteran or not based on their ID, what percentage, what was the rate of those identifying as a protected veteran out of those. So the information that's going to be shown is the same. It's just a kind of a matter of determining what the denominator is for determining those hiring rates or employment rates when we look at similarly at the individuals with disabilities section. So the first section is the overview, which is going to give us the hiring benchmark that was the target, and then the hiring rate based on, in this case, all hires for those that were hired and identified as veterans, and the evaluation of the outreach and recruitment efforts, just overall, whether they were effective or not. We'll also see in the chart a demonstration of veteran hires compared to non-veteran hires. So out of all those people that were hired, what was the counts of those who identified as veterans? The next section for the outreach and recruitment evaluation gives us those overall yes/no values for the outreach efforts and the recruitment efforts. And again, these are based off of a very simple evaluation of the data, which says if there were veteran applicants who self-ID'd as veterans in the applicant flow, the indication is that the outreach efforts were effective, and that'll show up as a yes if you had veterans that were applying for the jobs. In the recruitment efforts for hires, if you hired applicants who identified as veterans, somewhere in the level that you're reporting on, you'll see those show up as a value of yes for the effectiveness of the hiring efforts for veterans. And then the charts will show some information for different aspects of the veteran benchmark comparison. So you'll see for the locations that met the veteran benchmark out of those that didn't meet the benchmark. You'll look at counts of veteran applicants out of all applicants, everybody that applied, as well as the hiring rate among just the veteran applicants. So out of all the veteran applicants, what number were hired compared to those that weren't hired, and then veteran hires out of all the applicants that applied. So snapshots of the veteran information relative to the applicant information across the board there. And then for the self-ID analysis, you'll see charts showing the responses of the different response types at different levels. So out of those that were hired and out of those that applied, and if you report this within the workforce as well, what the response rates for different categories were. If people were identifying affirmatively or definitively yes or no that they were veterans, or if they declined to provide an answer when presented with that option. And then the locations with the lowest hiring rates, broken down by hiring rate as well as applicants, where we can control the number of locations shown there as well. Then the data view will show us all of the details in terms of the jobs and the applicant counts and hire counts, and the comparison of the hiring rates to the benchmark by location, across all those locations that we're reporting on. And then finally, the map view will show with a couple of items on the map. So the size of the dot will show what the hiring rate for veterans was at that particular location, and the color coding will indicate whether that location met the hiring benchmark or not. So the green dots you'll see were the ones that met the benchmark. Those that are in red did not meet the benchmark. And then the size will tell you kind of the overall hiring rate for veterans for that particular location. And if you click on a dot, it'll show you the details for that particular location, for the hiring rate and then the outcome of the evaluation to the hiring benchmark. Then the last section is the individuals with disabilities summary section. And similar to the veteran summary section, we have two separate pages for that. One shows for all employees and the second one for responses. And the idea is the same. The all employees is looking at the number and percentage of employees who identified as individuals with a disability out of all employees in the workforce. The responses page will show those who identified as individuals with disabilities out of those employees who provided a response. So it leaves out of the denominator those cases where someone declined to respond, for example. So the first section, the overview, will show out of the total number of employees, what was the total number of employees who identified as an individual with a disability, and compare that to the target percentage, which is still currently 7%, and give an idea of what the overall utilization rate is compared to that target percentage. And then the outreach and efforts effectiveness will be similar to what we talked about with the veterans section, where if there are individuals with disabilities among your applicants and or among your hires in the hiring data, that information will be used to identify whether either the outreach efforts for applicants or the recruitment efforts for hires, or the overall rate that we're seeing here were considered effective for the report year that we're looking at. And then for the chart to the right under the overview section, we'll see the percent of the job groups that met the target for individuals with disabilities. And so you'll see that out of all of those job groups that were evaluated, since these measures will take place by job group level within each of the locations that you're looking at. Then the outreach and recruitment evaluation section, we've got the overall determination of the effectiveness based on if you had individuals with disabilities among the applicant pools, and also among those hired within the report year that we're looking at. And then the charts will break down the cases where the outcome was you had a location that had applicants but no hires for individuals with disabilities, and then locations that had neither applicants or hires among individuals with disabilities, and then those locations that had both. You had applicants and you had hires who had identified as individuals with disabilities. It'll show a comparison of those within the same chart. And then the other three charts will show the counts and proportions of applicants who were individuals with disabilities out of all the applicants, then the hires out of just those applicants that were identified, self-identified as individuals with disabilities, and then the individual with disability hires out of all applicants in the final chart. The self-ID analysis section will show the self-ID outcomes across all the different levels. So looking at those that were hired, looking at the applicants in general, and looking at the workforce, it will show what the responses by category were to the self-ID question of disability status. And then the top underutilization section will show by location and by job group those top cases based on the number that we select of those that were underutilized job groups and those that met the target either by location or by job group. Then the data view section will show the details of again the job information and the applicants and the hiring rates, as well as the outcomes of the evaluation of recruitment efforts by location. And we can also look at the utilization rates, which look at those for the workforce by location and by job group to show the evaluation or comparison to the target, the 7% target by job group. And then the map view at the bottom will show on the map by location, again by size and by color coding. Size will show the size of the percentage that met the target, and the overall location-wide utilization at that location. And if you click on the dot, it'll show you the details for that particular location. And then the color coding will tell you if the location as a whole met the utilization rate, the target of 7%. So then the last section to look at is the briefing section. And I saved the briefing section for last because the briefing page you can think of as kind of the summary of summaries of the results from all of the different sections that we looked at individually. So the briefing puts together a page that is a little bit different from the ones we were looking at in that it includes results summarized across all those areas, but it also includes them in a single page where it's not just numbers and charts and graphs, but also incorporates some written descriptions of the results broken down by section. So the first section is going to give you just an interpreting the briefing section. So it's kind of a key to the information that's in the rest of the sections in this briefing page and what they mean and how to interpret them. And then you'll get a section for each of the different types of analyses that are included under the affirmative action plan with some written descriptions, and then you'll also get the results summarized in charts like these box plots and some written summaries of the results from that particular type of analysis. So for the EEO disparity analysis section, we'll get things like we can look at these by shortfalls, by job title, and by job group, where we look at in a box plot, where did most of the locations fall across the entire organization in terms of what the shortfall values were. And then the written descriptions will give us cases like, what the comparison was of the number of shortfalls to the previous year, what are the job titles that had the highest shortfalls, what were the groups that were the most impacted. So this is all for each section in a written format as well as a graphical format to kind of combine all of those into an overall briefing document on the screen. Now, one thing that this briefing section also lets you do, and I'm going to go up to the top and switch our location selection to one of our locations. So let's pick our Tucson location and apply that to view. One of the nice things that the briefing page lets us do if we look at it at the location level is for things like the box plots, it lets us compare this location to the rest of the locations within in this case, within the entire organization. So we can kind of see benchmarking for a particular location to the rest of the locations under the affirmative action program. So you can see things like overall looking at shortfalls at the job title level. Uh, you know, this location is at the very low end of the shortfall counts, which would indicate that they're probably doing better than most of the other locations. So you can see things like that and compare those for the different activity types. And you can also do that for each of these sections. So you can look at things like the number of goals they have. And again, relative to what the rest of the organization is doing. So you get some ideas about organization benchmarking for an individual location within the AAP results. Now, there's a lot of information that's in the briefing page that you can view here, but one of the other nice features that we added as part of the briefing page to make it more functional within your particular setting is there's an editing function. So if I click on this edit button, it's going to pop up in a separate tab the briefing page with some instructions at the top about how I can work with the results on the briefing page. But basically, what this editing page lets us do is within this tab, we can edit any of the contents of that briefing page that we were looking at just a minute ago. And we can create our own report and then export that report to one of these other file formats. So we can save it as a Word document or a PDF or send it to PowerPoint, or you can just print it out or do a print preview. But you can customize those results. So the briefing tab we looked at kind of gave us that overall summary, but this editing of the briefing page, we can put together a report to include whatever information we want to include, highlight things that we want to highlight. If you wanted to remove certain sections because you really didn't want to focus on those, you wanted to focus on other key pieces of the AAP results and take that to another document, you can hide those sections as well. But you can put together the results however you want to within this tab and then save them to this external format into a document. So, one example for that would be if you wanted to pull some of the charts and the text and kind of customize the results and then just drop all of that into a PowerPoint deck, you could save that to a PowerPoint file and you'll have, all the contents of the briefing page in that PowerPoint document that you can then add into a different presentation. You can customize that, but you don't have to copy and paste or try to transcribe information from the dashboards application into another format if you wanted to use those outside of the application, outside of the dashboard application. So that's the editing function for the dashboard that you can put together here to save that information in an external file format. So the last things that I want to cover in this session are the walking through some of the general navigation items within the application. So this applies throughout the dashboard sections. At the top, we've got a navigation menu bar. The first of those, the little hamburger icon, if you wanted to minimize the navigation panel on the left-hand side, you can collapse that by clicking on the icon there to maximize the page itself for viewing and move that in and out with this icon. The home icon will always take you back to the main page. You can also always go back to the main page by clicking on the icon at the very top of the left-hand navigation pane. So if I click on that what would be your company icon. But if I click on the DCI icon here, it'll take me back to the main page as well. The contact menu item you can use if you're having a technical issue or having some sort of problem with the application. Uh, it takes us to a form that you can fill out and submit to us. It'll go into the DCI support inbox, and then we can help you with any technical difficulties you might be encountering as you're moving through the dashboards application. There's a glossary link in there that takes you to a glossary that has definitions for some of the common terms you might run across in the different pages of the dashboards application. And then the last two in particular, I want to point out because these are good references for anybody that's using the dashboards. Um, if you're trying to find out things like, what page has the stuff on it that I need, or I'm looking at a page, but I can't remember what these things are trying to tell me. The guide that we have built in here goes through each of the sections in the application and goes section by section and screen by screen into details and definitions of what everything means and where you can find it and where you move around in it within the pages. So basically a more detailed version of this video session we went through today. As a reference, all of that information is in this guide section that's always available at the very top of every page within the dashboard. So I would encourage you as an end user of the dashboards application, if you're ever stuck on trying to figure out, I'm looking at a chart, but I don't really remember exactly what it is that it's telling me from my AAP data, check into the guide and go to the corresponding page that you're looking at, and you'll find detailed explanations of everything within here, along with screenshots to kind of match up with what you're looking at within the pages in the application. Now, the last section, if you are an administrative user for your organization, the admin guide will walk you through all of the different things you can do as an admin user for administering the application. So that includes things like inviting new users and then assigning access for the users, creating the access groups that I mentioned at the beginning. All of that takes place within the admin portal, and the admin guide will walk through all the different sections of the admin portal to explain what you can do there and how to do it. So for example, if you were an admin user and you needed to invite a new user within your organization to join and have access to the DCI dashboards, this will walk you through what's in that screen and then how to walk through the process of creating an invitation and sending that to a new user for them to be able to create an account and be able to log in to the application. So I'm going to return back to home here, and just let me thank you for viewing all of this and for using the DCI Dashboards application. At DCI, we hope that you find this to be very helpful with implementing the affirmative action plan within your organization. And I encourage you as you're going through this, if you run into any questions or have any feedback for us at DCI, we always like to hear from our clients about how well the application is working for them and what things they might like to see added to the application in the future. So please reach out to us and let us know if you have any questions about that or any ideas or suggestions for that as you begin using this and continue using this in your organization. So thank you again for your time today. I hope you enjoy the application. I hope you find it very useful and helpful in your affirmative action programs within your organizations. Thank you.